All right, business correspondent Rotus Odiri joins us live from Davos. Rotus, great to have you on the news. I mean, that was a 70-minute speech by U.S. President earlier today in Davos. However, he has gone to social media, Truth Social in particular, to speak further on the issue. What do you make of the latest update from Trump over Greenland and the framework agreement with NATO?
Good evening, Ngozi, good evening. Good evening to all our viewers out there. Yeah, this is like the latest head-spinning twist in this ongoing saga. And I mean, you have to note that this agreement or claims of an agreement are coming from Trump himself. We have not heard from Mark Rutte, who is the Secretary General of NATO. And most importantly, Ngozi, is that Rutte doesn't have the jurisdiction to hand over ownership of a territory owned by a NATO member to another one, unless I'm mistaken. So it's very short on details. Trump, in his Truth Social post, claims that Secretary of State Marco Rubio and some, I think, Vice President J.D. Vance and some others will be involved in the quote-unquote negotiations, but there's no details. And negotiations involve more than one side. So you only have one side here, which is the president claiming that this framework has been agreed to. And then what about the people in Greenland and Denmark that have steadfastly said that it's not for sale, they're not giving up? Are they part of this negotiation? So we'll have to wait for more further details on this, because it's frankly, it sounds pretty sketchy, but the markets liked it.
That's interesting. Of course, we'll get to the point as to how the markets are reacting. But Rotus, would it be safe to say that the WEF agenda, to a very large extent, has been overtaken by, Trump's dramatic policy moves? What exactly happens with Greenland now that he says a framework is in the works?
Well, yeah, I mean, the next step now is to get more details on whatever this framework means. Like, well, what exactly does he mean by a framework? And he claims it's going to be good for both sides and it's really great for the United States. So what does that mean exactly? He has to give more details. And again, just 24 hours ago or 48 hours ago, the Prime Minister of Greenland, Jens Friedrich Nielsen, I think is his name, was saying that, they're prepared for anything, and, that military option was not something that they could rule out. No, Trump has ruled it out now. But the point is that just hours ago, both the Prime Minister of Greenland and also leaders in Denmark said this is not going to happen, and they've been backed by Europe. So we need to see how Trump is going to pull a rabbit out of a hat with whatever negotiation this is. But as far as what happens next, tell us the details. But it's still a stalemate as far as matters are concerned, without military action.
Thankfully, so.
Yes, Rotus, you did mention earlier that the markets were happy with this, but do we know what exactly in the speech they were reacting to? Because, like I said, it was a 70-minute speech.
Yeah, and I was in the hall and I sat through the entire thing. So the markets like two things. First off, him coming out and saying that he's not going to use force. And you played the clip already, saying, oh, I'm not going to. He made it sound like it was all up to him. Oh, I'm not going to use force. I could if I wanted to. But no, he couldn't use force. And I said this, actually, funny enough, earlier today on the morning show and also on our Global Business Report, that he can't use military force, because if he does, the markets will crash. And yesterday, that quote I gave you from the Prime Minister of Greenland, when the Prime Minister said, look, we are prepared for anything, military action could happen, the markets fell. The stock markets fell on Tuesday, the dollar weakened, bond yields rose. I mean, it was turmoil. And I've said this all day long to as many shows on the Arise News Network as possible. People do need to keep this in mind. While Trump acts like he answers to nobody, he actually answers to two entities: the American people who are going to be voting in November later this year, and he answers to the markets. it spooked him. It spooked Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and they told him, look, you need to come out today in Davos. This is my guess, so you need to come out today in Davos and tell people that military action is not going to happen, because the markets were very alarmed. So if he was to even try any military action, it would be a catastrophe for global markets. So I think that was the check that made him put that on the table. And then secondly is this latest Truth Social post that he's not going to impose tariffs anymore on Europe, and this framework of a deal. You know, the markets like that. So it was removing military action off the table and also saying that he's not going to impose tariffs anymore on Europe over this Greenland matter.
Yeah, now we know how the markets have reacted. How is the global community, especially those that were or that had to sit through Trump's tirade? NATO had some level of tongue lashing. You had people like Macron, Emmanuel Macron of France, getting some tongue lashing too. Tell us more about that and other important takeaways from his speech at Davos.
It was, because it was largely a domestic speech. I mean, he came there talking about how great the American policies. He talked about how inflation has been defeated. He talked about how the U.S. stock market is, you know, at all-time highs. Although he acknowledged the fact that the markets dropped yesterday. So it was a very odd thing to come to an international setting and be talking about domestic issues. But then, yes, as you've correctly mentioned, he did throw some jabs at Europe. He said Europe is unrecognizable. I think he was making a reference to immigration. And he was throwing jabs. He mentioned Venezuela, saying that Venezuela is not going to be prosperous under the supervision of the U.S. He mentioned Gaza and a few other things. So he touched on international issues, but it was mainly domestic. A lot of people there, I mean, the reception was a bit cold. And there was one particularly really horrible moment where he made this racial remark about people from Somalia, saying that, their IQ is a little higher than I thought it was. Somebody actually booed him. It's not sitting not too far, because there were audible gasps. You know, he has this ongoing beef with Representative Ilhan Omar, who is she's from Somalia, but represents Minnesota. And you know what's been going on in Minnesota with that lady that was killed by an ICE agent, and his beef with the governor there and so on, because it's a Democratic state. So that was one of the nastier moments of the speech, but it was generally a cold. Well, they laughed at a few as just jokes, right? But outside of that, those are the only few high points. Generally, for the speech, people started leaving after a while, and it was because he's been alienating Europe, and you're in Europe. He even had things to say about Switzerland, about the leadership here, about the tariffs. So, yeah, the reception was a bit mild to cold to Trump today.
Yeah, others would say it was dictatorial in nature in giving that speech as usual. But now that you have mentioned the relationship with Europe, how would you describe that at the moment, the U.S. relationship with Europe?
Yeah, well, look at what both of you have said. Ngozi mentioning the tongue lashing he gave out to his European allies. Adeso, are talking about his, dictatorial, tone. Stuff like that is going to alienate people. You're going to, you're going to divide, draw a line between, dialogue between you and your allies. And that is the whole supposed to be, ironically enough, the theme of Davos this year is this quote unquote, the spirit of dialogue. It's about talking things over, coming to agreement. And, so right now the relationships are strained. Although with this breaking news now, this latest framework is claiming, that has been put in place and that the tariffs are off. We'll have to see what happens and how Europe responds, because there was news that the Europeans were preparing retaliatory tariffs to these tariffs for this Greenland matter. So some will say he's backing off. There's this whole taco thing, TACO, Trump always chickens out. So some might say that's what the case is. But either way, the relationship with Europe is strained.
Rotus, let's talk about how this latest group that meets every year, what is the place of Africa in all of this, especially, of course, Nigeria? And what are we looking forward to tomorrow? What are you hearing, that really makes an impression on you when it comes to the issues that concern Africa and indeed Nigeria?
Well, I mean, great question. WEF tries to address as many issues as possible. Nigeria, of course, we opened up the Nigeria House. That's supposed to give Nigeria visibility. We're hopefully, fingers crossed, speaking with Wale Edun tomorrow, Honorable Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy. He's been talking about investments and being able to, tout Nigeria's reforms to a global community. And it doesn't get more global than this, Ngozi. I mean, there's big institutional investors here. In fact, Larry Fink, who now runs operations here at WEF, I mean, he runs BlackRock, which is the largest asset manager in the world. So there's big institutional investors here with large pools of capital that can deploy them in Nigeria and elsewhere. So it's really important to be. And on your note on Africa, I think even to now dive into what to look forward to tomorrow. Ghana is hosting an event here. President Mahama is here. Former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo is going to be giving the opening remarks. I think it's an event called Shaping a Sovereign Nation or something to that effect. President El Sisi of Egypt is going to be there as well. So Africa is pretty well, represented here. I saw Lesotho Haniego, who is the governor of the Reserve Bank of South Africa. We've interviewed him a couple times here at Davos. So, it's visibility, dialogue, investments. Africa is getting a good representation here, and there are a lot of takeaways.
Right.
Rotus, I recall our trip to Davos, WEF 2025, and how we're discussing Nigeria's visibility with no Nigeria House.
Thankfully, there is a Nigeria
but
House
now. There's a Nigeria House.
That should make a lot of difference.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Rotus Odiri, Arise business anchor there in Davos for us.